second part of the Chapter 5 test review has to do with graphing periodic functions, so graphing the sine and cosine graph. You'll be able to graph this carefully with 5 given points. Make sure the midline is specified with 2 transformations for your proficiency level. You may use your notes, but no calculator. This whole section is no calculator. For the highly proficient level, you're doing multiple more than 2 transformations. So it could be based on a word problem, it could be a reflection change, so an orientation change. So there could be a lot of different transformations happening at the highly proficient level. These worksheets that are involved in that are listed, focusing, the transformations focus on 7, 6, and 7, and then 5-8 focuses on the period transformation, or period change. So once again, no calculators on this part, only your notes are going to be allowed. So I would certainly make sure to add what the different parts of that do. So keeping in mind, I have the sine function, so y equals a sine b x minus h plus k. Cosine has the same general function except it's cosine right here. So giving an equation for the following graphs, the thing with this is it could be a sine graph or it could be a cosine graph depending on where you want your start and finish to be. If I decided I was going to go from here to here, that's going to be a cosine graph. I'm going to make the amplitude, if you see the sides, the scale here is 8. Amplitude is 8, so I could call that 8 cosine of x. I'm not moving it left or right, I'm not moving it up or down, so that's the only transformation happening. If I wanted that to be a sine graph, I could start it here and end it here, in which case this would be a negative orientation, so negative amplitude is still 8, sine x is going to be my equation there. On part B, same kind of thing. If I decide to go from here to here, that's a cosine graph. If I decide to go from here to here, that's a sine graph. Depending on where you want to consider your start and finish, it can be different things. However, on your test, what you're going to see is a solid line for the part that you're going to make the equation for, and a dashed line for the rest of it. So there's only going to be one answer, with one exception on your test. So this one, I have a midline of -1. That means my k is going to change to -1. If I do this as a cosine graph, then it's moved over. Oh, crap. On my sine graph over here, I just realized because of where it starts, this should be minus pi over 2 because we moved it pi over 2 to the right. My apologies for that. Okay, so back to this one. If I start it here and end it here, that's my cosine graph. That's been moved to the right as well. No amplitude change because I'm going one up from my midline and one down from my midline. So that's y equals cosine of x minus pi over 2, and then -1 because of that midline change. If I want to do the sine graph from here to here, then I don't need to move it left or right. That's y equals the sine, and that's just going to be of x minus 1. So, on the change in B, that's your period change, that tells you how many how many cycles you're going to complete within 2 pi. So normally your 2 pi is right here, your pi right here, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 2. Normally we finish one full sine cycle -1 and +1 within 2 pi. What this is telling us is we have to finish that 4 times within 2 pi, which means it's going to take, so we've got 4 sections here. This means that we're going to start here and we're going to end here because we have to have 1 full cycle done in a quarter of the space. So we're going to go up to 1, down to -1, and back up. And we're just going to draw 1 cycle. But what we would see is that cycle continue 4 times before we got to 4 pi. On part B, sine of pi over 2, or x plus pi over 2, that's our sine graph simply moved over. I do want to make sure you guys are aware this is not representative of the level of difficulty you're going to be seeing. You're going to see more than this, and so I would definitely recommend making sure that you've completed the worksheets 5.6, 5.7, and 5.8. So this is pi over 2, and I just realized that was plus pi over 2, so we're going back to negative pi over 2. It's pi, and that's 3 pi over 2. So this sine graph is being moved back. We're going to start at our midline, go up, back to your midline, go down to -1, and back to your midline. So that is our 1 cycle. With multiple transformations, the first thing I focus on is where your midline is going. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this just as 1, and I'm going to end up going off the graph because my midline is at -3, so I'm going to draw my midline. My amplitude is 2, which means I'm going to have to go 2 above and 2 below, so I'm going to add another line here, which is going to be kind of obnoxious. So that I'm able to go down to, simply to show you guys kind of what the overall is going to look like. So this makes my new, like basically what was the x-axis. The plus pi over 2 is going to take me back, so we need to also label this. That's negative pi over 2, that's positive pi over 2, that's pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So sine graph starts at the midline, so I'm going to start at the midline at negative pi over 2 because of that plus pi over 2. I'm going to go up 2 because my amplitude is 2. I'm going to come back to the midline, go down 2, come back to the midline. So that takes care of all 3 of those transformations. The cosine graph, so I'm going to stick with the scale of 1. This is going to be negative pi over 2, positive pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, 5 pi over 2, and 3 pi. Cosine graph can be a little bit difficult, a little bit more difficult to deal with. So you want to draw that midline again. Remember that the cosine graph starts above your midline in terms of the amplitude. So where I would normally start 1 above my midline, because my amplitude is 2, I need to start 2 above my midline. Because I'm moving that right pi, I'm going to start 2 above my midline and over to pi. That's going to be my starting point. The cosine graph starts up, goes to your midline, goes down, the same amount of your amplitude. So again, going down 2, back up to your midline, and then back up. So that is my not very curved cosine graph. So best thing you can do for yourself is make sure you have a solid set of notes, solid page of notes ready to go, and make sure that you have completed all those worksheets, especially 5, 6, and 7, or sorry, 6, 7, and 8, so that you are ready for come your way. And that is it for the Chapter 5 test. Good luck.